morning to all of you. I am Cedric C. Bibero and I am Bachelor of Secondary Education major in English. So here I am again in front of you guys for the new study report about prescriptivism and equality of a language. So as a student, it's very important that we study this topic so that we can further expand, enable, and speed up our brain to think about things about it. So I hope you would like my presentation. I hope you learned something about it. So let's not prolong my intro. Let's go and join me in my reporting. So first, we need to identify what is prescriptivism. Prescriptivism is the attitude or belief that one variety of language is superior to others and should be promoted as such. An attitude of language use that makes judgments about what is right and wrong and holds languages up to an ideal standard that should be maintained. And prescriptivism prescribes the best and accurate usage of grammar. Further explanation, prescriptivism is the idea that a language rules should be consciously set or organized by a certain people, like academies or societies, who define which forms are to be considered correct and which are the false. And this is a policy of describing languages as we would like them to be rather than as we find them. Now that we already know what is a prescriptivism, we will now take a move on and let's go to prescriptivism emphasized. So prescriptivism emphasized the first one, the rules of correct proper usage of grammar, which is dictates the good and the bad grammar. And the number two, which is control and regulate language use. And the third one, which is common example of prescriptive text like the style and usage guides, dictionaries, and writing handbooks, and the like. Verbal hygiene. The over anti-prescriptive stance of linguists is in some respect not unlike the prescriptivism they criticize. The point is that both prescriptivism and anti-prescriptivism invoke certain norms and circulate particular notions about how language ought to work. According to Deborah Cameron, which is a verbal hygiene Routledge 1995, the use of the term verbal hygiene is intended to capture the idea, whereas to use the term prescriptivism, which is recycle the opposition that is trying to deconstruct. The problem with prescriptivism. So according to Marty Cowlin and Craig Hancock, the general ignorance of grammar allows prescriptivists to impose nonsensical mandates and allows tastemaker and tastetakers to focus primarily on a superficial error in language that are used. Why is it bad? In part, it is bad because it falsely assumes that the existence of a uniform and unchanging standard and thereby fails to recognize the naturalness of a linguistic variation and change. And another reason is it is bad because it is frequently, though not always, but it is based on a bad descriptive linguistics. Now that we already know what is the problem with the prescriptivist and why it is bad, let's now take a move on and go to the prescriptive grammar. So So it is essentially a manual that focuses on the constructions where usage is divided and lays down to the rules governing the socially correct use of a language. And these grammars were affirmative in on language attitudes in Europe and America during the 18th and 19th century. Prescriptive grammar can be used into 5 aspects. The first one, it is actively defines the language rule, and the second one, it can say if a part of a speech is wrong, and the third one, it is attempts to standardize the language, and the fourth one, it is less concerned with real and word usage, and the last but not the least, the fifth one, it can be used into formal. Now that we already emphasize and define what is prescriptivism, let's now take a move on and let's go to the language equality. What is a language equality? As an opposite of prescriptivism, it is the idea that every form that is used by competent native speakers is equally correct, as it fulfills all the function and language that it has to do. In the 18th and 19th century, the notion was widespread that some languages generally presume to be those of peoples with a primitive physical culture either lacked grammar completely or had a very simple grammar. And versions of the story persist today, claiming that there was some tribe in the remote region of the world, the depths of the Amazon or the highlands of New Guinea, who have a language of only 100 words and no grammar. Actually, this myth was exploded once the linguists began to study these languages and discovered that they had grammatical systems every bit as regular and elaborate as any language of a culture with a civilization stretching back thousands of years. Although the grammatical structures of some languages are very different from those of English, every language has a grammar. What is true of language equality? It also holds the truth of a dialect within a language. Occasionally, you may hear it said that some dialects such as African American Vernacular English or AAVE or Puerto Rican Spanish is ungrammatical or deficient. In truth, though these dialects follow internally consistent rules, that is, they have their own consistent grammatical systems, but ones that differ from the grammars of other speakers of English or Spanish. Sometimes it is claimed that some thoughts cannot be expressed in a particular language, or contrarily, that an idea can only be uttered on its language. It's true that would presumably make some languages better than others, but such claims turn out to be hard to substantiate. What does it mean to say that a concept cannot be expressed in a language? Well, often people seem to mean that one language has a particular word for a concept that another language lacks. For example, a German has the term Schadenfreude, which means taking pleasure in the misfortunes of others. And some English speakers borrow this word when they want to express the idea. Does that mean that we can express the idea in English? Well, in fact, The very act of explaining what the word means demonstrates that it is possible to express the idea. True, it may not be always possible to translate an idea word for word, but paraphrasing other techniques will get the job done. And languages are flexible enough to adapt and expand to the needs of the speakers. And if speakers of a language need a particular concept, often enough, they will create a word to express it, either by relying on the native word creation processes or by borrowing the term from another language. So, indeed, enough English speakers have found "canderfood" to be a useful term that it can now be found in the larger English dictionaries, although it still has the feel of a foreign word. Over 3/4 of the words in modern English, particularly the more learned terms, are borrowed from the other languages from the other countries. And that is where my report ends. I hope you have obtained information that you can adapt to yourself or use as a teacher in the future. So bless you all and goodbye, and thanks for listening. Bye-bye!